So now let's dive into the first of these, the dominant ESFJ subtype. What does the dominant ESFJ look like?
So the dominant ESFJ is driven, confident. They're striving to be a benefit to society by putting themselves out in front and doing that in an attractive and appealing way. They are outgoing, they can listen well, they decide quickly, and they can also speak with confidence, even as they take in that new information. So they have a very assertive manner, an affectation that produces confidence in other people, not just in themselves. They have strong managerial skills. They're good at balancing their values and preferences with while simultaneously responding to the environment. So what does the moment need from me? And how do I make sure that I balance that with the things that are important to me and that I like personally? And they're good at doing that. They're good at responding to the environment without having to leave their values behind or their preferences. They're good at building rapport. They are detail-oriented. They are good at planning, and they attend closely to what people say. So it's a matter of receiving information from others, usually scanning for the needs of the situation, and then creating plans to make sure that happens, and then organizing people together, sort of herding cats to mobilize everybody in that direction to get those needs met. But they're still linear thinkers at the same time. So they consider one or two pieces of information at a time. They're not bad with dealing with, metaphors, jokes, abstract concepts. They have that relationship to their intuition that allows them to access those pieces, even though they're still, as mentioned, more linear in their thought progression.
But playful.
Exactly. There's a playfulness there, and there's an ability to sort of get concepts that don't have to necessarily be so concrete and rigid. They also have a very strong halo pattern. So if you've heard us talk about the halo pattern in other podcasts, this is it's almost like a ring around the outside of the brain that signals a person is aware of and practiced with the expectations of society.
Yeah.
So they know how to play well with others, basically. They know how to merge into society. And in fact, they have a very strong halo indicating that they can match society's expectations and then not just match them, but also help lead them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're very in touch with health and well-being. They often have technical training. So this is what sets them apart from perhaps other ESFJs, is that they usually are tapped into sort of a technical aspect. They quickly put skills to use for the betterment of those around them and for society as a whole. So again, that responsiveness, but bringing in a technical aspect as well. And they sometimes have a little bit of an entrepreneurial bent, right? They might be interested in starting a new business on their own, or maybe a couple new businesses. They've got that piece where they're tapped into something new and novel and willing to take a risk. And they're often, no matter what their role, they're often advocates, right? Community advocates for whatever it is that they believe on a personal level is important. They also have a reflective side, and they usually bring together facts, feedback, memories, information, and bring them all together in those quiet moments to contemplate bigger meanings. Mm-hmm. One of their challenges, though, is that because they have that more in-charge style, sometimes they can come across as somebody who's a little pushy, right? And that's one of the challenges that they experience, is that assertiveness and that capacity to herd cats and mobilize and move things and be very quickly responsive can sometimes feel to other people a little overwhelming. But otherwise, these, especially if they're mature and seasoned versions, these are really good leaders and managers as ESFJs.
One of the interesting things about the dominant subtype, in fact, many dominant subtypes, no matter which of the 16 types they are, but the dominant ESFJ is they're comfortable with hierarchy. Now, doesn't mean they love it or they want, hierarchy around them all the time, but this is the ESFJ that is most likely to be okay with the pecking order, the chain of command, if you will. Okay enough to be in charge, even drive themselves to want to be in the lead, maybe a manager or a leader role or the top of the company or something like this, or at least moving through those ranks, totally okay with it. So I think that's something important to notice about the dominant. And I think this assertive EJ energy, this is, I think these are some of the stereotypes around ESFJs.
Yeah, I don't know if this ESFJ will necessarily mistype, although they might mistype as a thinker. They might mistype as maybe an ESTJ.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. The list of careers that will help somebody develop these qualities, the dominant subtype qualities, or maybe just appeal to somebody who is already a dominant ESFJ, indicates that, right?
Yeah.
That they have comfort with management positions, administrative positions, etc. And I think hierarchy it's not a dirty word, right? Yeah. And I think dominant subtypes understand the purpose of it and the reason why we have a chain of command, right? We need somebody at the top who can herd those cats and get them all moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, the desire for power to be able to meet others' needs. I think that's the key here. It's not power for the self, it's power to be able to affect change.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some of the careers this subtype might be clustered around.
Okay. So this is not an exhaustive list. Just get the pattern of what all of these careers have in common. And the point is that they are careers that both appeal to dominant ESFJs and are also careers that will help an ESFJ become more dominant.
Yeah.
Like these are the environments in which their mind will be more wired to have that more assertive, confident feel. So the list is nonprofit organization director, community outreach coordinator, social worker, human resources director, healthcare administrator, marketing manager, public relations specialist, career counselor, teacher or educational administrator, corporate trainer, health coach, event planner, politician or political consultant, family therapist or counselor, and life coach.
Let's talk a little bit also about the deeper elements of the cognitive functions. So we mentioned that for an ESFJ, we won't go too much into it, but we did want to mention this for type geeks. The two cognitive functions is the technical name that an ESFJ is using. The one is a decision-making function in their brain, and the other is the learning or perceiving function. For an ESFJ, they lead with a dominant or driver function called extroverted feeling. We've nicknamed it harmony. Again, it's about getting needs met. It's about social equilibrium, about creating harmony in the world, quite frankly. And this is what drives the values and the decisions. And then that's paired with that co-pilot auxiliary of introverted sensing, or what we've nicknamed memory, where we've come from the past, tracking changes, all of these things, standardizations. It's how they perceive and learn and take in information. So there's an attunement with these two functions. And the way that they're focused or attuned, not their capacity or their proficiency, but the way that you use these functions indicates your subtype. That's basically how we know what will probably show up on the EEG machines. Let's talk about the attunement. Let's talk about the framework of the attunement, and then let's talk about what it looks like for a dominant. We'll touch on this for each of the subtypes.
Okay, so as mentioned, if you listen to the podcast where we talk to Dario Nardi, we go deeper into this. But effectively, the concept is that each of these functions, these mental processes that make up type, have an orientation that is either focused, assertive, a very almost like a narrow but strong energetic stream going out, right?
Yeah.
A more assertive bent or orientation. And then we can also use each function in a more diffused way. It's not as focused and targeted, but it takes in a bigger territory.
Yeah.
You see the peripheral a little bit more. And so you see a wider spectrum. So it's not as intense, it's not as assertive, but it's a little broader and sees a little bit more. For people who have a dominant subtype orientation, so in this case, dominant ESFJs, both of their preferred functions, both extroverted feeling or harmony and introverted sensing or memory, are going to be what's called analytic. That's the more targeted, focused, assertive energy orientation. And when both of your functions are analytic or more assertive, it makes sense that the subtype itself would make a person a lot more assertive, more targeted, more focused.
Yeah. Meaning you're also, though, not as receptive to things coming in from the side. Right. You're on your path with intentionality, dominant, and you may or may not hear the things that are off to the side around you as much as some of the other subtypes we'll talk about.
Yeah, and we talked about with dominant ESFJs that they do listen and they take in information, but they're almost immediately looking for ways to apply the information they heard to respond to the needs of the environment. Well, that means that they're going to collate that information. They're going to consider that information based on experiences that they've already had. And so sometimes taking in information isn't the same necessarily as responding to a bigger picture. It could be a single piece of information and the ESFJ is acting on it quickly. And so in that way, they might not be seeing as big of a picture, taking as much information in order to, to maybe get every need met. Yeah. But that would also take away some of that assertiveness. So it's a cost benefit analysis, right? In some ways, it's actually good that they're not seeing the whole picture because that takes a little too much time for somebody who's in a position of leadership or management. And as we mentioned, they can a lot of times consider some of those bigger implications when they're alone and quiet.
So each of these subtypes is also associated with a chemical, a preferred chemical, neurotransmitter or hormone. The neurotransmitter for the dominant subtype, the chemical of choice is testosterone, which would also make sense. More of that assertive energy, testosterone lends to that. I know technically it's not a neurotransmitter, it's a hormone, but we're using these interchangeably.
Why don't we just use the word neurotransmitter and call it good, even though they're technically two different things?
Gotcha.
Like communicates communicates the idea, I think, well enough. It's a piece of information that goes from one part of the brain to the rest of the body.
Absolutely. So testosterone is the chemical of choice, though.
Right.
And we'll talk about each of the chemicals for each of these. So